As we spoke as we mentioned in the past, Torah means lesson or instruction. So the commandments of the Torah, pretty easy to figure out what the instructions there are. It's telling us what to do, how to act, or what not to do. Those are the mitzvot, the negative or the positive commandments. The stories of the Torah, okay. We also could figure out, usually find a message in the story, find one way or another how to apply it to our life, to apply the story to our life, especially many of the stories that are discussing a struggle or a certain something one of the biblical figures went through. So it's something that we could some way or another, apply it to our life. It's like a mirror that, everyone could see themselves in the mirror. So even though there's stories that happen to greater people than us, but smaller people also, everyone's reflections could reflect in a mirror. So in the stories, we also see, despite the fact that the stories happen to very special and holy people, we also are able to apply it to our life and to find the message and the instruction in the story. Like we discussed at different opportunities, some of the stories, how they apply and the message they have for us. But then sometimes there are simple or almost plain verses that seem like just stating a fact and not really saying anything special or unusual. A commandment is a commandment. A story, usually the stories that are recorded are unusual in one way or another. But then there are just the verses that are simple, so to speak, or dry. And then it's much harder to see how does such a verse fit into this instruction, under the title of instruction or lesson. But there too, obviously, there is what to learn. And many times when we read the verse carefully, we see that there is a lot beneath the surface. And that's something what the Rebbe did many times in his talks. He would discuss a certain verse, and many times even things that seem simple, and show how it's not very simple. And it's full of meaning and deep and deep lessons that we could learn from it. The name of this week's Torah portion is Chayey Sara, the life of Sarah, which actually comes from the opening verse of this week's Torah portion. It is interesting to note that actually the name might be a little deceiving. You'll hear, the parsha is called Chayey Sara, so there must be many stories about Sarah in that parsha. But really, all the stories of Sarah, Abraham's wife, happened in the past parshiyot, in the past Torah portions. In this week's Torah portion, we actually just speak about her burial, and then we move on. So the verse, the life of Sarah was this amount of days, actually is, so to speak, concluding or summarizing Sarah's life. And then it speaks about the story of how Abraham bought the plot to bury her, which is a fascinating story for itself. Then it speaks about Isaac finding his match, Rivka, which is also a large part of the parsha of the Torah portion. And really, this week's Torah portion is really almost seemingly not at all about the life of Sarah. It's actually about the afterlife, or after she passed away, of Sarah. Whatever the case is, let's learn that first verse and see what it may tell us. All right, there you have it. Number one. This is the opening verse of this week's Torah portion. It starts, and the life of Sarah, in Hebrew, Chayey Sara, the life of Sarah. That's those three words. That's what the name of the parsha. That's the words that the parsha is named after. The life of Sarah was 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. All right, pretty simple and straightforward. Anything odd in this verse? Anything that seems strange, perhaps? Yeah.
Why do they separate 100 years and then 20 years and then 7 years? Why is that all separated? That's peculiar.
Very right. That's one thing that's somewhat strange. Robert, you had your hand up? I can't hear.
Yeah, they were marked. Each one is a separate entity unto itself relative to Sarah.
Oh, so you're giving an answer?
Yeah.
Okay, but let's first appreciate the question. Right? So the question, like Susan said, the obvious question is, usually if I want to say someone lived 127 years, that's exactly what I'll say. And they lived 127 years. I don't say, and they lived 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. That's just not the way people talk. Why did the Torah tell it to us in such a manner? That is one question that we're going to have to deal with. And then there's something else. The verse concludes, these were the years of the life of Sarah. Usually, the typical way of counting someone's years, you'll say, blank lived 127 years, or the years of blank were 127. Here you're saying the years of Sarah lived 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. And then you repeat, these were the years of Sarah. There's a lot of extra words in addition to saying years between each digit, which is one question. There's a lot of extra words. The life of Sarah was 127 years. These were the years of Sarah. What's that? The life of Sarah. Sarah lived 126 years, or the years of Sarah was 127 years. There's some extra words here. Yeah, Ben?
Yeah, I wanted to say that in the Torah, that's how they give you the age of people. It's not just for Sarah. You see it over and over in the Torah, either that or even when they give a gift, when they're giving the gift to the tabernacle, they also naming it and announcing it in that form. But of course, in the Torah, there has some special meanings too. But I think it's the way they used to count things in that time. The same like the dealing with their phone later, when he says, what's 400 between you and me? You don't do it today. That's not how you do a deal today. So, but they had a special way of talking and counting and so forth at that time.
Right. So it's a very good point that when the Torah mentions or lists years, there's a reason for saying how old someone was. That's how we could know. That's how we have a frame of reference of when different occurrences happened. Our question here is not so much that the Torah mentions that she lived 127 years, but rather how the Torah mentioned it to us. That it says 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, which is not typical. And the end of Bereshit, the first Torah portion, mentions many, many years. It doesn't say year between each digit, right? The typical way of counting today, and also the typical way the Torah usually counts, is without saying the word year between each digit. So even though, yes, it's important for the Torah to mention how old she was, but to say that this 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years would be extra, okay?
But I thought they do it for other people too.
Right, we do it for other people. Usually it's
Yeah.
for a reason. In other words, that we could understand we could have a frame of reference and when different occurrences happened. But even then, the Torah could have just said it much shorter. Why just say the word year in between?
Yeah.
So let's go back to our source sheet, and which number 2, where Rashi offers a explanation along the lines that Robert mentioned earlier. So let's see, Rashi, the father of commentaries, says the following. The reason that the word years was written after every digit, right? Like you can see in source 1, 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, is that is to tell you that every digit is to be expounded upon individually. And here we learn something, the rabbis tell us something very interesting. When she was 100 years old, she was like a 20-year-old regarding sin. Just as a 20-year-old has not sinned, because she is not liable to punishment, there's a certain punishment that, mainly punishments that come from heaven, that are particularly applicable after someone is 20. So too, when she was 100 years old, she was without sin. So that purity she had when she was 20 lasted until she was 100. And when she was 20, she was like a 7-year-old as regards to beauty. 7-year-old is beautiful. So when she was 20, she still attained that beauty. So whatever the case is, the point of this explanation is that when the Torah says the word years between each digit, that's to teach you that there's something special about each one of these digits. And we should learn that the special quality that each one of these numbers have were carried over from one group of years to another group of years. Okay? Now, that's all regarding the first part of the verse. However, the second part of the verse is still seemingly extra. The second part that says, these were the years of Sarah, that's extra, because we know if we say, and the life of Sarah is 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, why do we have to say these were the years of Sarah? The life of Sarah. So here comes the main part of the verse that I want to focus on in this most of the class today. So again, Rashi explains the years of the life of Sarah. These were the years of the life of Sarah. This is to teach us that all of them were equally good. They were all equally good. Typically, a person lives, and we have, just like in a year, we have good days, not such good days. So also sometimes years, people have better years, not just good years. And here we're saying that the life of Sarah were all equally good. Meaning, in addition to that each digit teaches us that there's a special quality that carried over throughout her life, every individual, all her years were good and equally good. The obvious question on this statement or this explanation that all the years of the life of Sarah were equally good, and that's why the Torah sort of puts them all together, that these were the years of the life of Sarah, to teach us that they're all in one category, obviously is hard to understand. Let's take a look at Sarah's life. Until she was 90 years old, she didn't have a child. She only had Isaac when she was 90. That's a pretty tough life. How can you compare her life from before she had a child to after she had a child? And she was so old that she even didn't believe that she would have that child. She was totally surprised by the promise that she would have a child. A little earlier, when Abraham went down to Egypt, she was taken away from him to the palace, to Pharaoh's palace. That wasn't so easy. Later again, she was taken away from Abraham and by Avimelech. So these were definitely turbulences in her life. If we look at her life, is it right to say that they were all equally good, that all her years were equally good? Didn't she have different periods in her life, better and worse? How could we say that they were all equally good? And this is the point that we want to discuss today. How even though, obviously the message here is that even though Sarah's life did have different ups and downs, seemingly, but we're still able to say that they're all equally good. How? Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I can't understand that you're saying that it's equally good. I can say the average of it was good. Generally, it was good, but she had some bad periods. Like before they traveled to Israel, I'm sure it wasn't an easy life with that crazy king or whatever it was in Aram Naharaim. And then at 65, I think that's when she traveled. It's hard to travel. Then she had Ishmael, a problem with him and with Hagar. So there were a lot of problems. I can't say that it's equally good.
100%. That's exactly the question that we're discussing, that we're bringing up.
Oh,
How could
okay.
we say that they're equally good if she had so many ups and downs and hardships in her life?
Yeah.
So we'll discuss a few explanations. This is actually a topic the Rebbe spoke about quite a number of times. And we're going to bring up a few different thoughts that he said at different times. And we'll compare them a little and see the differences. The first approach to this question, how could we say that they were all equally good if there were differences? The Rebbe spoke in 1964. He offered the following thought. Yes, there's differences in life. There's ups and there's downs. And really the ups and downs demand from us different behaviors. When we go through a harder period, we have to act one way. When circumstances change, we have to act differently. And based on the circumstances that we're in, that's how we have to act. And when we're speaking in our service to Hashem, in our job in this world, ultimately, there will be changes, and based on the circumstances, that's how we're going to serve him and act as Jews. If that's the case, can we say, let's say in our life, that everything is equally good, everything is equal, everything is the same? Certainly not. On the one hand, however, if we look at it from a slightly different angle, let's not look at what's happening. Let's look at what we're doing, at what we're accomplishing. So then we can say that as long as whatever situation the person is in, you were in, you did the best you're able to. So then all the situations were equal on your part, that you put the most effort and made the best out of every circumstance that you were in. So then, in a certain sense, they're equal in your effort that you're investing in it. For example, we have, let's say there's a difference between there's weekdays and there's Shabbat, the seventh day, the day of rest. During the week, we're engaged in different activities, where on Shabbat, we rest from those activities. So that on the one hand, we could say that on Shabbat we are, and it's true, we are on a higher spiritual level. For example, there's a mitzvah to eat on Shabbat, to have pleasure, to rest, and to enjoy Shabbat. And the way we enjoy it is through eating. Most people enjoy eating. So the way to have pleasure is eating. So there's a commandment to eat. Now, during the week, we don't really have that commandment. So true, there's a big difference between the weekdays and, let's say, holidays, Yom Tovim, or Shabbat. But on the other hand, that's only when we're speaking on what we're doing. If we're thinking about how we do it, as long as what we're supposed to do, we're doing to the fullest. So then there's something equal about all those days, that I made the best out of those circumstances, those situations that I was in. And it works in making the best out of the situation we're in. And also, if we're speaking as Jews, the best in how to serve Hashem. We serve to the best of our ability in that situation. So here, this might be one approach to how we could say all the years were equally good despite the ups and downs, because Sarah, wherever she was, she made the best out of the situation. Yeah, Robert, you have something to say? Oh, yeah, muted.
I just wanted to hopefully add to the conversation, because I interpreted that qualitatively, if the day that I'm gone, if they said Robert lived a good life, and so I've accomplished what I wanted here on earth because I'm satisfied with what happened. There are always those things that we don't have control of, but we do have things that we mark as our successes, let's say, or the sum total of our life. And, she had a good life because she was able to live life to its fullest, and she had accomplishments. And so to me, that what all of our lives should be. And, when we feel sorry for ourselves, there are always those that are less fortunate than us. And for me, I've had my ups and downs as well, but my attitude and my accomplishments have always been something that I've been proud of. And I have a sense at my last days that I've accomplished what I was brought here on earth to be as a person.
Very nice thought. She's saying the idea here is that the sum total makes everything equally good.
It makes the bad inconsequential because you've overcome it.
Right.
And it's not a stain or a defect. It's the bumps of life that we all have.
Correct. Right. And as long as we maybe to add a little or to sort of connect it to what I was saying before, that as long as we tried our best to overcome those bumps, so then we really accomplished what we're supposed to accomplish, and in all the situations that we were in.
That's what I feel. That's what I
Right.
believe.
Very, very nice thought. So that is one, right? So that's one approach. How they all could be equally good, even though Sarah had her ups and downs. That she made the most of whatever situation she was in. Then there's another approach, a little different. What is the first word of the Torah, the first word of the name of the Torah portion? Chayey Sara, which means the life of Sarah. We're not just speaking here about, and that's the key. The key here is that we're speaking here about her life, not just about her years. The life of Sarah, which is actually saying the life, is not really, like we mentioned earlier, the common way of listing someone's years. The life of blank was 90 years. Let's say John Doe lived 90 years, or his years were 90, but his life was 90 years. So perhaps the point that the verse is trying to tell us is that here, when we're speaking, what we're trying to bring out here is not just the amount of years that she lived, the amount of years that she passed through, but rather her life. What does that mean? What does that mean, her life? What are we trying to drive from this? We all know we have a body and a soul. And a lot of our life, we could sort of, I guess, categorize as somewhat of a struggle between combining the two, the life and the soul, and our body and our soul. Sometimes our body is stronger, sometimes our soul is stronger, depending on where we're holding in life and what we're doing and how we're acting. When we're speaking about someone who's righteous, someone who is one of the founding mothers of our nation, what was her life? If she would be asked, what is your life? Her life is her soul. Her life is her spiritual accomplishments. So true, she had physical pain, and a lot of it. And we are not disregarding that in any way. Being kidnapped, from being taken away from your husband, is a real pain. It is something that is not easy, and it's uncomfortable, and it's painful. nevertheless, and she definitely had that. Not having children for many years, that's a real pain. So even though, however, what we're trying to, the distinction that we're making here is that even though she had that pain, but that wasn't her life. Yes, she had that. She went through all of that.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you referring to the yichut, the madriga that she was on, or yichut that elevated her to a level which explains her, explains the purpose of Chayey Sara, her yichus, in other words, that was something that may have elevated her right there, in itself.
Right. So we're saying that.
I'm trying to see where you're getting at, but I'm just seeing if that's on the right. We're on the same channel because I'm trying to.
So we're trying to the first idea that we're establishing is, what is her life? What would she categorize as her life, or as the main part of her life?
Oh, no.
Right. So when we're speaking about righteous people in general, their life is the primary focus of their life is their service of Hashem, is their soul, and the actions that come from their soul, the mitzvot that they do, the good deeds that they do, the love and fear of heaven that they possess, their belief in God and their trust in God. That's their life. That's where they're living. Yes, their body, they're not, they don't ignore their body. Torah says you have to take care of your body, you have to be healthy, and the pain, their body, they have physical pain. However, their life, they identify as their life, as their spiritual life. So now, when we're speaking about Chayey Sara, the life of Sarah, what was her life? Her life was her connection to the one above, to Hashem. That was her life. So then I could say they were all equally good. Yes, she went through hardships. Yes, she had challenges. That's all true. And we're not diminishing that at all. However, where did she live? She didn't live in those hardships. Her life, she lived in her connection to Hashem with her soul. So when we're summing up the life of Sarah, her true life, so then it's right to say they were all her years of life, her whole life was equally good.
Rabbi?
Because her connection to Hashem, her connection to God, which is what she cherished most in her life, was always strong, no matter what she went through physically, like we mentioned earlier. So again, we started the class with a question that the rabbis teach us, that in the first verse of this week's Torah portion, the Torah summarizes the life, the years of Sarah, how long she lived. However, it does it in a somewhat unusual fashion. First of all, it mentions the term year between each digit, and also it says again, these were the years of Sarah. So we brought out that the mentioning year between each digit, that is telling us that there is unique qualities that she had and carried over from one digit to another, her beauty, her pureness, that she didn't have any sin. Even though usually when someone gets older, we make more mistakes and we do more things that are not necessarily correct. By Sarah, that didn't happen. She was always pure. And the second part of the Torah of the verse is indicating to us that all of them were equally good, which obviously leaves us with this question: what do you mean they were all equally good? Didn't she go through so many hard times and ups and downs?
Rabbi,
I'd
And
like
we-
to answer that.
Yeah, I'll finish the summary and then, okay? In a minute, excuse me. So we mainly focused on two approaches so far. The first one is that her life she used every situation she was in, she utilized to the best of her ability. So on that respect, we could call that all her days were equally good because she always used them to the fullest. And the second approach was that we're speaking about her life. And her true life is her spiritual life. Her true life is her soul. And therefore, even though she went through hardships, but that is not what we are counting when we want to summarize her life. Her true life and her spiritual life, which was all equally good. Yeah, what was your question?
Yes, what I wanted to say is that when we say all her years were equally good, what it can refer to, and I think you were just now touching upon that in a sense, is that no matter what situation she was in, good, bad, or indifferent, and a number of them were quite trying sort of tribulations that one would have to go through, her reactions were always that of a tzedekah. She did the best that could possibly have been done with it. And she sort of triumphed over whatever challenges faced her. And she came out on top spiritually in the sense that she always made the best, even of what might have been a bad situation or could have been a worse situation had it not been for her foresight and her good reaction and her sinlessness.
Correct. So more the way she reacted and made of every situation, that's what we mean when we say they were equally good. That's what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Right. Let's move on.
Can I, before you
Yeah,
start,
sure.
say something?
Yeah.
In the parsha, they only give her two sentences, the first two sentences. And all you are talking about, you're saying the parsha of the week, but you're only talking about her life. Her life is not even mentioned in those two sentences, other than counting the years.
Right. So
So
that's
where are you getting all that information? It's not from the parsha. It's from the mefarshim, maybe.
But Ben, isn't the title The Life of Sarah?
The title is, but the
All right,
parsha
so
is not.
that's comprehensive of her life.
But
Don't
the
have to
parsha is not.
necessarily do it point by point, but clearly the category is what I don't want to call a category, but it's the life of Sarah.
It's the culmination of the life of Sarah. Two sentences.
right. So you're both making very good points. And I'll explain you why.
All right, let's use it.
So first of all, what we typically do in this class is that we usually focus and discuss one of the episodes of the Torah portion. Many times the Torah portion has a few stories, a few commandments, and we usually take one idea and we focus on that idea. Now, that's point number one. So here we're focusing on something unusual that we see in the first verse, and we're discussing what could be the reason for it and how it would apply to our life. Now, the point that you're bringing up is, it's very strange. The Torah portion is called the life of Sarah, where really it's not speaking about her life almost at all. Yeah, the first verse says how long she lived. The next few verses are speaking about how she was buried. And then it goes on to Isaac. And like Robert said, but the name of the Torah portion is the life of Sarah. So that means it's about her life. So this is actually and that's the category that the whole Torah portion's in. So this is actually really another discussion. And there's a lot to speak about and to learn from this idea, how just one thought, since you both brought it up, so I'll just mention it, how actually her life, typically when we speak about someone's life, their life is when they live, not so much their impact after her life.
Rabbi,
Here, what's unique, the Torah portion that's called after her life is actually mainly about her impact after her life, how she was buried, fine, but her continuation of Isaac, which is something very strong, how our impact is lasting and goes further than her life. But that's another discussion, to see how all the stories in this Torah portion that happened after she passed away are really a direct continuation of her life's mission. But let's stay focused on the topic of our class,
Rabbi,
which is how were all the years of Sarah equally good? That's the topic. So to move on a step further, step deeper from what we're saying before, up until now, the problem that we were dealing with was she went through many hardships, hard times. So how could we say her life was equally good? Let's go a little deeper. Let's accept the two explanations we gave already. Let's put aside her physical hardships, okay? For a minute, let's put it on hold. We took care of it. Her life was her spiritual life, or she made the best out of every situation she was in. So her physical hardships we'll put on a side. We already dealt with that. Okay, so we're speaking here about her spiritual life. Is it fair to say that even in her spiritual life, everything was the same? Someone who's righteous, someone who does good deeds, as they grow older, their good deeds accumulate and they reach higher heights. They become better. Someone who works on refining themselves and being nice, let's say, and they're actively trying to be nice. So yes, as time goes on, they'll become nicer to other people. Or any characteristic, any attribute that we try to engrave in ourselves, the more we work on it, the more we toil and we make a part of our life, the higher we get, the more it becomes part of us. So is it fair to say, even if we're just speaking about her spiritual life, even if we're just speaking about her service to Hashem, her connection to God, is it fair to say that her connection was always the same? When she was 20 years old, when she was 10 years old, 5 years old, 30 years old, 80 years old, 90, 120 years old, they were always the same. And just as an indicator to see how her divine life changed and increased and got better, when she, let's say, fulfilled God's commandment, the first commandment that God gave Abraham to travel away from Haran to Israel, right? The first commandment to travel, and Hashem didn't say where he's going to travel, and then she ended up in Israel, then he ended up other places. So that first commandment that Abraham fulfilled, he didn't do it himself. He went with someone else. He went with his partner. He went with Sarah. So Sarah is part of that commandment. And obviously that was a real achievement. That was the first, like we spoke in an earlier class, that was the first, which is the first recorded divine connection, and really the first time God communicated to them. So obviously that was a huge leap from the way she was beforehand. Or when her name changed until a certain point, her name was Sarai. Then her name changed to Sarah, the way we know it now. But the name has a meaning. How she became a minister, and her Sarah means that she's a ruler in general, not only over herself or over her immediate surroundings. So that shows on a great achievement that she had with that name change. obviously the name change was to indicate something that she went through, a achievement that she achieved, a level that she reached, a new height that she reached. So even if we put aside her physical, the physical turbulences in her life, didn't her spiritual life get better and better? When you say they're all equally good, you're really saying two ideas. That the good that she had in the beginning carried through the end, but also the good that she had by the end, she also had from the beginning, which is really hard to understand. What does that mean, that the level that she achieved by the end of her life, she had that from the beginning? She went higher and higher, and she accumulated, more new heights in her service to Hashem. So here we have a very deep idea. And wait, before we get to the answer, which is a deep idea, before we get to the answer, let's just compare. Even if you say that she put her most effort wherever she was, but that still doesn't fully explain that they're all equally good. In the end of the day, the end of her life was better than the beginning. She was on a higher level than she was in the beginning of her life. So true, in the beginning of her life, she put into all her effort and she didn't waste any energy that she had, but the end of her life, she was even higher, she was even better. So what does it mean it was all equally good? Seemingly for this question, the earlier answers fall short for answering them. For answering this question. So here we have a very deep and profound idea. True. Sarah went through different levels in her service of Hashem. She started off like everyone. If we want to, let's say, learn a job, it takes time. And the more we do it, the better we get. So no one's going to say the first day I walked into the office, the first day I tried something new, was the same exact as the last day. There's no such thing. The last day you were much better than the first day, typically. So what does it mean that they're all equally good? Because over here, here's the key. Her spiritual life, they all connected and they all were linked. They were like links in a chain. What she did today enhanced the tomorrow. And what she did the next day elevated and was connected to what she did the day before. Don't look at every day isolated. Don't look at every day individually. But rather, today's accomplishments would bring today's accomplishments would bring tomorrow's achievements. And what I achieve tomorrow is built and elevates and is connected to what I did yesterday. And this is particularly true when we speak in a spiritual sense, our service to Hashem, that here it's very true that what we do every day enhances and is connected to what we do tomorrow. And what we do the next day elevates what we did the day before. And here Sarah could properly say that all her days were equally good. Because the achievement that she did her very last day, which was most probably her highest achievement, because every day she reached new heights. So the achievement that she did the very last day wasn't disconnected from the achievement that she accomplished yesterday. On the contrary, yesterday's achievements brought today, and therefore it was elevated and connected and made into one unit with today's achievement. So that very last day sort of brought all her achievements into one sum goal and to one sum of ultimate good, and therefore they're all similar, ultimately the same good, because they were all elevated into that height that she reached her very last day. Meaning, yeah, Robert, I'll go get to in a
Okay.
minute.
Yeah.
Meaning, here we need both extremes. On the one hand, every day, Sarah invested everything she was able to invest. She utilized to the best of her ability, like we said in the beginning of the class, one of the first answers. On the other hand, and precisely because of that, she eventually, what she accomplished every day, and especially her final day, all came into one unit of achievement, of ultimate achievement. And that's what we mean when we say they're all equally good. Meaning her final achievements, her highest achievements were elevated and connected with her first achievements. And really since they were one unit, yes, they were all equally good, because that height brought with it the earlier heights. Which I think this idea has a very powerful lesson for us. That what we do, many times we look at what we do in isolation. Meaning we think about the present more than the past and the future. But when we think also how what we do now, in addition for it being present, it also elevates the past and prepares us for the future. And really what we do, and every day, many times we learn new things, and we learn better things, and we learn how to be better people, a better Jew. So really what we learned today, so even if we didn't know it yesterday, but yesterday we did what we knew. So then what we learned today would elevate and connect to what we did yesterday, and it would lead us to one sum goal, to one final unit. And yes, we'll be able to say they're all equally good. What do you mean yesterday? I didn't know what I knew today. But since what I knew today, I tried to incorporate it into my day. So therefore, what I do today would elevate and bring with it what would elevate my achievements and what I did yesterday. So that's something very empowering and very inspiring, that first of all, what we do is not just in isolation, it prepares us for the future. And also it is elevating what we did in the past. And therefore this moment, let's not just look at every moment in isolation in this moment, but let's also look at this moment, how it elevates and brings a completion to our achievements of yesterday and prepares us for our achievements of tomorrow. Yes. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, just I'm trying to add to the conversation is,
Sure.
there's a term in Yiddish which is a gute neshama.
Yeah.
And so that obviously has some significance, because I don't ever hear of a bad neshama. But again, Sarah typifies, as I know other people who we would call as having a gute neshama, always being in the presence of Hashem, because they could not do otherwise. So I don't know if any of the text describes her or anyone else having this kind of a lofty neshama, but I expect the term a gute neshama came from somewhere, and I don't know where. That's my ignorance. But to me, that's a very important facet. It's a very important element, and it's a Jewish term, I think, more than if anybody else's term, and understanding the loftiness of one's life and their good deeds. You know, whether it's a Maggid, which is really more of in mysticism, but a Maggid also was somebody of elevated accomplishments, goodness, whatever. So I don't know. That's part of what's sort of jumbling around in my mind right now.
Interesting. Very interesting point. Yeah. You're muted. Okay.
Would you
Yeah.
say living in the now brings those all together, the Back to the Future, because you're concentrating in the now and that's when it all comes together?
Right. So in other words, yes, that what we do, our good deeds that we do now elevate and connect to what we did yesterday, and that empowers us for tomorrow. Correct. So we shouldn't just look at what we do now in isolation of the past and the future, but when we look at it as it all turns into one equally good sum total, so that's very empowering. That's the idea. Correct. Yeah. Susan?
I have a question. Is it possible that she was born highly spiritual and applied that high spirituality throughout her life?
Yes.
Is that
Indeed,
what we're
but
really saying about Sarah?
correct. But even then, seemingly there'll be different levels, and in applying that high spiritual level, there would be different levels, and based on how much she probably, did more every single day. She didn't just stay put on the same level that she was.
Okay.
But that's what we're saying, that all those levels and everything she did really were combined in and made one sum total of all the years were good. Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say, so basically, there is a framework for everybody's life that yesterday is built on the day before that, and tomorrow is built on today. But you are inserting whole life into that framework.
You what?
You are inserting Sarah's accomplishment into the framework of
No,
anybody's life. You can
You
tell
mean
the same story
insinuating.
about anybody's life.
He means
No, Ben, I think you used the word
inserting, not
insinuating, not insulting.
right, inserting.
Not insulting, insulting, I said.
Inserting. Right. So that's the idea is that we take an idea that we see by Sarah and we're trying to learn from it. Exactly. We're trying to learn from what Sarah did to apply it to our life. That it shouldn't just stay removed. There shouldn't just be stories and ideas that we learn about people that were much higher than us or much more spiritual than us, but rather it should be ideas that we learn about people that, and always, yes, they're much higher than us, but we should apply a little bit of that into our life. Correct. That's the idea. That's one of actually the ideas that the Rebbe was very into, is making everything applicable. Making everything a practical into our life. It shouldn't just be a story. It shouldn't just be a law that we can't do these days, but rather it should be something that some more, some less have to do with our life. Okay. All right. So I think we're.
Rabbi,
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to say that the idea that you mentioned before about that they dealt with their situation and they did the best that they could, and the reaction was the best that they could. So there's a Hasidic thought that says that every Jew should ask himself, when will my actions approach those of Abraham and Sarah. And the natural answer is, how can we compare ourselves? How can we make a comparison? How can Torah say that we should say that to ourselves? And the answer that I was told was that the same way that they did the best that they could with their reactions to situations, that's how we can approach the levels of Abraham and Sarah by us doing our best. We approach their level that they did their best that they could with their reactions to situations.
So we should try to we should learn from them how we should act in our situations. And that's what it means to try to be like them, to learn from them. All right. Very nice thought.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
All
Thank
right,
you.
yeah, you're welcome. Everyone,
Thank you,
have a
everybody.
good
Thank you,
afternoon.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Excellent class.
Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.